I had no idea how much a child would consume my life in the nicest possible way. It feels slower to complete tasks. I didn't quite appreciate that the buck stops with us. Your expectations as a business owner are completely different.
This is the Education Business Podcast for all founders and business owners in the education sector. This podcast is for you if you have an education business or you're thinking about starting one. That could be tutoring, publishing, holiday clubs. It really doesn't matter. You're in business and you're also in education. But most of all, you're focused on improving outcomes for children in the way you know best, through your business. I'm Claire Riley, co-founder of educational resources website Classroom Secrets, and I'll be sharing how to make your education business bigger, better, and have more impact through my own experiences and also the conversations I have with other founders and business owners in education. The Education Business Podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets, helping you to support your children's learning. Hi Karen, welcome back to the Education Business Podcast. So the last time we spoke on the podcast about 9 or 10 months ago, you were expecting your first child and we had a conversation around business and having a baby. And then that very same day, you actually went on to have little baby Alice, which was a bit of a surprise. How amazing, what an amazing story. And so you're 9 or 10 months in, and I wanted to invite you back because I have seen you post quite a lot, really, especially on LinkedIn, about your journey of having a baby and having a business. And I feel like you've really tried to lean into the flexibility, being able to do both. And that is something that I felt like I did as well, although you certainly been able to go that one step further, which I think needs celebrating. And so I wanted to welcome you back to the podcast, really, to talk about how that's been going, because I know that listeners who are in a similar position will be able to get a lot of insights just from your experiences. So how has it been? How have the first 9 months of Alice's life been when you have been running your education business?
Hi, Claire. Thanks so much for having me back on the podcast. I really appreciate being able to come on and share a little bit about motherhood and how that journey is going with having an education business as well. So, where do I start? It's definitely been a roller coaster. I had no idea how much a child would consume my life in the nicest possible way. I've absolutely loved being a mother, but it's had its fair share of sort of tears, joy, frustrations, and everything in between. And I really didn't quite realise the impact of having a child would essentially have on my life. I've really had to work out in the business what's important, what is a nice to have, and what is not essential in the business, and really had to streamline everything within Mind Marvels, my education business, to, I guess, delegate and make things more simpler for myself. I used to, have complicated procedures and ways to do things that only I could do. And, having Alice now, I've had to really take a step back, look at all the operations in the business and actually delegate better than I had before. Something else that has occurred in my business in the last 10 months is that we've actually hit our 6-figure turnover, which has been absolutely fantastic. But also with that has come me having to employ a team of people and all the trials and tribulations that go along with employment and delegation, and really just trying to make the business work in the most efficient way, whilst I myself are the most time poor that I ever have been. Now, I have been sharing a fair bit on LinkedIn just about the conferences and the things that I attend with Alice, because I really want women and mothers and families to feel empowered and to feel like even if we have businesses and we have children, we still have opportunities and we are still able to attend events, or we're still able to pursue our goals. It's just that things might be a little slower than they were previously, or things might not happen at the pace that we once expected. And that for me has been the biggest shock, I think, to my business. The thinking time that I perhaps don't have now, and also how it feels slower to complete tasks, but that I've also had to be very, very efficient with what I'm working on. And I don't have the luxury of time anymore the way that I used to.
Thank you so much for sharing that so honestly. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and she said that parenting is very frustrating. And I really resonated with that. And I think it's an important word that you've brought up today. Parenting can be very frustrating, but equally so can running a business be frustrating. And then when you put the two and two together, it's not a case of frustration, add frustration equals double frustration. It's actually frustration times frustration, and it can be really, really difficult. And for me, the slower pace was quite hard, to be honest, to navigate. So I think it's great that you've brought that up. But what I wanted to say was congratulations, because this experience has obviously forced you to think differently, especially when it comes to delegation. And you are seeing the results of that. It's paying you dividends, probably literally. Um, and that's an amazing thing. I think one thing that can be thrown up in these situations, and it definitely was the case for me along that journey, is you have to learn about trust and how to be able to delegate something effectively and trust that it will be done in the way that you need it done. And it's still something that we're still learning lessons on right now. But I'd love to know what has changed for you. So how do you delegate now in comparison to how you delegated maybe 10 months ago? What are the lessons that you can bring forth for anyone else that will make them think differently about delegation? How are things different for you now you've had a baby in terms of delegation? Are there certain steps that you now take different to before when you have a new process to put in place, or you've got a new task that needs doing?
I definitely appreciate more now how valuable time is and how limited our time is as well, especially having to juggle the tasks of being a mother and a business owner. So for me, delegation was something that was quite hard. I really liked to micromanage, just having full control over my business. And I used to always flip-flop around decisions in the business about whether, oh, it would be lovely to have a business partner, someone to bounce ideas off. And to a certain extent, it would be lovely. But I really like that this is my business and I've built it with sort of my vision in mind. So for me, delegation has been quite difficult, but I've had to do it because I knew that my time would become this much limited. Really, for me, I think the delegation started way before I gave birth last year. So I knew that I needed to get systems and processes in place that would allow me to take some sort of time off, some sort of maternity leave. But what I hadn't anticipated was that when I did give birth to Alice, I also hadn't anticipated that I would feel a bit different about the business. So I wouldn't necessarily feel as passionate, or I might have felt a bit more lost getting back into the business side of things. But really, when it came to delegating, I brought on a new team member just shortly before giving birth. And I've really had to trust my gut and instinct with her, as well as having quite a strict standard operating procedures manual so that she would have somewhere to reference and somewhere to go to know how to do certain things in the business when I wasn't there. So that has been challenging, but what I've taken from that is that I don't need to be the only person in the business. And of course, I'm not the only person in the business, but that the business can run without me being there 100% or without me having to micromanage tasks. And yes, things might get done a different way to what I anticipated. But what has actually happened is that by allowing other team members to come on board and to do things in the back office, like, social media, graphics, and write blog posts, etc., that's actually sparked a different creativity side than what I am capable of. So I've really had to trust in that and let it go. And I've seen the return of that. Our website is starting to gain traction, and we are slowly but steadily gaining more and more social media, just a bit more sort of social media engagement, really. So alongside working in the sort of the back end of the business, if you like, the admin side, I then took on the session leaders to deliver the sessions in schools. I started doing this in April last year, and I had quite varying results, to be polite. I think when you bring on staff, you don't always bring the right people in at the right time, and that's okay. That's a learning curve as well. But what that allowed me to do was step away from doing the actual schoolwork and then allow me to have these session leaders in schools that are doing the work and doing an amazing job once I'd hired the right people in. And for that, I feel so thankful. And it's given me the chance to step back, assess the business, and work on the business rather than in the business, which is what I was doing too much of before. So now what's happening as we look to grow the business, I can see me building the business up bigger and having more and more people in and delegating tasks to them. Now, it doesn't come easy. And again, this is where the SOPs come in, the standard operating procedure manual really, really helps with this, because I can't remember all that information in my head, and I don't want to always be the person that people ask. I want them to have an understanding of where that information lies in the business and that they don't always need to consult with me first. So that's where the business is progressing, and where we look to really excel in the business is by bringing in the right team members, delegating successfully, but also knowing how to delegate successfully without me always being right in the centre of that process.
Do you teach children as part of your business offering? Have you considered using resources from Classroom Secrets? At Classroom Secrets, we're always adding new resources for a range of subjects, and we're keen to hear your suggestions for resources too. We know that you didn't go into business to work more hours than you did in the classroom. You went into business to give you freedom. Let us help with that. Visit classroomsecrets.co.uk to sign up. I'm not really sure the right way to ask this question because I'm not sure what the question is. But you and I have known each other for a number of years now, and we've had lots of conversations about team members. Sometimes that's from a franchise perspective, sometimes it's about employees, and the differences between those as well. You've obviously been on a different kind of journey where you've kind of been forced to do some things differently to how you did them before, and I always think that's a good thing. But can you sum up how you feel about the journey, or how you understand things differently now to how you might have understood them a few years ago when we would just talk, and now you've experienced those things? If you could sum it up, what would you say the key difference is in the way that you think?
Wow, Claire, what a question. I think in terms of sort of employees and franchisees and bringing on staff members, I definitely feel that I didn't quite appreciate that the buck stops with us. And I know that seems really obvious because it's our business, but people have different tolerances of, whether they can come into work that day, or how important doing something is for the business in comparison to what I do for the business. So I hadn't really appreciated that a lot of my time would be spent talking things through with people. And it's not necessarily a negative, it's just more about your expectations as a business owner are completely different. And sometimes it seems they're almost misaligned to other people's because they see it as a job. And again, that's understandable. You have different roles. You've both come into sort of Mind Marvels from a different place in your lives. But for me, I found that really difficult. I'm the sort of person that even when I was working for someone else or when I was a teacher, I always tried to do my best and not let people down and do, 100% or try to put 100% into whatever I was faced with. And I haven't always received that in return. And I think in the early days of motherhood as well, I was really having to juggle with staff letting me down or not adhering to the guidelines that I thought I had set out. So although your question is quite general in terms of what have I discovered or what have I known, I think for me it's that staffing is really, really difficult and everyone tells you this. And since becoming a parent, I found this more so because you are relying on people. So I can't necessarily just go to a school when somebody phones in sick. So you have to be really, really organised and prepared for all eventualities. I still think of myself more as a leader than a boss or a manager because I do believe that a leader will take on ideas and will be innovative and they will sort of listen to others. But it has been a challenge, definitely. And although I am enjoying this role and I'm enjoying spending more time at home with Alice, it has really allowed me to sort of shake up the business and see what works and what doesn't, but also bring on feedback from other people in the business, such as my session leaders. And that's been really important as a leader to take on other people's ideas and to listen to them, but not necessarily implement them. It's about seeing everything overall and whether it's the right decision for the entire business rather than for an individual. But I think for me, besides the time as being a challenge for me, definitely staffing and definitely expectations of other people, because that can really challenge your own ideas and your own concept of your business and the direction that it's going to go, but also whether it's going to be successful. If we have staff members that are letting down schools constantly, then that's going to have a knock-on effect on our business. So it's about keeping a dialogue with those staff members and making sure that everything is running well and that also schools are happy with our service so that we do have repeat business and so that we do continue to grow Mind Marvels and be more successful.
The employee mindset is one of the hardest things to come to terms with when you're an entrepreneur. It's such a weird thing because you want an employee to have an employee mindset, but at the same time, you also don't want them to have that mindset. And it's such a fine line. And in my experience, you find people who have an employee mindset, but then they're more entrepreneurial, and that can be helpful. But you don't want everyone to be in that situation either, because then they can leave and set up their own businesses or buy businesses, which you're really happy that they do that. But you also need people who are just going to be steady. And I think in my experience, we've just got better at hiring the right people who align with our values and also align with the standards that we set. So it does get easier, but it is a hard thing. Even am I 12 years into business? It can be really, really difficult to see the balance. And when I was in your position where I had this small team of people around me, one of the things that I found really hard was the fact that I was the entrepreneur and the employer, yet I was surrounded very closely with employees who generally had an employee mindset and would bring those things to the table, which was fine. But to your point around looking at the bigger picture and considering everything, that's not necessarily what you will get from someone who has more of an employee mindset. And so you do have to sort of step back, take the feedback, but maybe it's not something that you can do as a company for a number of reasons. Usually it's to do with funds, or it's not profitable, or it's just not going to help the company move forward, even though it feels like a good idea. And I found that really difficult during those times. Now I've just got over that and I'm fine with it now. And I think that's how you grow as a business owner. And the last point that you made that I think was fantastic, you said, I thought I'd communicated it. And that is a huge learning, and great that you've said that. You haven't said, I communicated it in this way. You've said, I thought I'd communicated that. And that's one of the things that I think we can all take from listening to this conversation, is that the first thing I do when a person or a group of people in the company do something different to what I expected them to do is to ask, what did we need to change in how we communicated that? What needed to be different? Did it need to be a different communication style? Did it need to be more hands-on? Did we need to do it more than once? And so the fact that you have expressed that in a way that you understand that, I think is really amazing, and a lesson for everybody really to take away from today. Karen, you've given me your time, even though you don't have a lot of it anymore, and I really appreciate that. Just grabbing a few minutes here and a few minutes there in a quiet room in the house. So thank you so much. I know everyone will have a lot of insights from the conversation today. What have we not talked about that you think is important for education business owners to know?
Thanks, Claire. It's been a great discussion with you, and I've really enjoyed just thinking more about my business and being reflective of the business as a whole as well. I think there's potentially, just talking about education businesses specifically, we really need to talk about the budgets and the lack or perceived lack of budgets in schools or for teachers. And it's absolutely a valid concern for sure. But what I'd say to other education business owners is that budgets are always an issue, especially in education. But I think we have to sometimes step out of there's no budget and think about the bigger picture when it comes to utilising or selling our services to schools or teachers or to other education business owners. I often hear that there's no budgets or that people can't afford X, Y, Z. And of course, that can be true to a certain extent. But that's where, as education business owners, we have to be creative and we have to be inventive of ways that we can make our services not necessarily affordable in the sense of slashing prices, but how we can perceive the value of what we offer as education businesses. So, for example, with Mind Marvels, a common objection that I hear is that, there's no budgets in schools. But when you look and delve deeper into what Mind Marvels offer, within specific schools, the money for these sorts of mental health services are ring-fenced. So whilst the budgets can be tight, there is definitely money out there for supporting pupils and students with wellbeing. So therefore, I think when we talk about our businesses, it's about placing that value and also offering schools or other education business owners ways or means to actually pay for our services and to help them find really good solutions. So that's something that I would urge other education businesses really think about, is how they can make it easier for their services or their products to be bought by others. And the last thing I really wanted to touch on today, Claire, was that regardless how successful we are in business or how many, how many achievements you have, there always is going to be stumbling blocks in your business. You start with something and then you move on to the next thing and the next thing. And there's always going to be issues that you come across. They don't ever go away. What tends to happen, and of course I know that you'll know this, is that you start to build more and more resilience, or you build better leadership skills so that you're more equipped to deal with these issues as they crop up. I always sort of think of this a bit like raising a child, because when you first start and you have this newborn baby, you're so overwhelmed. And then you move on to like the weaning stage and you forget the newborn stage. And then it just keeps, that, don't want to say the issues, but the growth of that little baby or human, it just amplifies and amplifies. And it's a really nice way of looking at our businesses as these kind of little babies that start off with us not really knowing much. And then our expertise grow and grow. And so does our little businesses. And that's what's really exciting, is when our businesses, our education businesses, start to grow and literally have arms and legs. And you can see how important it is for our businesses and the impact they make, whether that's locally or UK or even globally. So I think that's just something to think about, that these issues do not go away, but we develop those skills to really work on the best solution every time we have some problems that we encounter. And then finally, just to touch on the budgets within education businesses, that issue will never go away, but it's really about how we're inventive and how we find solutions so that we can make our businesses the success they deserve to be. Thank you so much again for your time, Claire. I've really enjoyed having this chat.
Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets. To find more resources to grow your business, visit classroomsecrets.co.uk.